My wife slept with my business partner, then secretly transferred $250, $0 of our savings into her sister's account, and now she's fighting me in court over the house worth over $1 million. Was I a fool to trust her? I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this, completely by the woman I thought I knew inside out. It all started with a gut feeling, something off that I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first, I thought maybe I was just overthinking it, but then small things added up. She started acting distant, secretive. Her phone was always on silent, and she'd hide her messages whenever I came near. I noticed her spending more time on her laptop late at night, typing away like she was hiding something, but I brushed it off. We'd been through tough times before, and I figured she was just stressed with work or whatever. Then, one day, I caught her. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was supposed to be working on some reports in the living room. She had gone out shopping, or so I thought. I was in the kitchen when I saw her phone buzzing on the counter. A quick glance told me it was a message from some guy named Jake, something about meeting up later. I froze. I couldn't believe my eyes. She'd been lying all along. I never suspected she'd cheat, especially not with someone like Jake, who I knew was her. I felt my stomach turn cold. My mind raced. How long has this been going on? Was I blind? How could she do this to me? I waited until she came back, my heart pounding like a drum. The moment she stepped through the door, I confronted her. I asked about the messages about Jake. Her face twisted into a smirk, and she dismissed it as just work stuff, trying to brush it off like it was nothing. She called me paranoid, said I was overreacting, that I was imagining things, but I was. I had seen enough to know that she was lying. It was clear she'd been sneaking around, hiding things from me. The worst part, she had the audacity to deny everything, even when I showed her the message on her phone. She laughed it off, saying I was jealous or insecure, but I knew I'd been played. That night I couldn't sleep. The betrayal hit me hard. I felt sick, angry, and so incredibly stupid for trusting her all these years. I started digging into her phone, her emails, anything I could find. That's when I discovered she'd been sleeping with Jake more than once, apparently. But that wasn't even the worst part. I found out she'd secretly transferred $250, $0 of our savings into her sister's account. Just like that, she'd taken half our life savings without telling me. I couldn't believe it. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that? I felt betrayed, furious, and utterly crushed all at once. It was a shock to realize how deep her lies went. Not only was she cheating on me with Jake, but she'd also been stealing from us behind my back. I started questioning everything. How long had she been planning this? Was she ever really faithful, or was I just blind to her true nature? It's like a punch in the gut to find out that the woman I loved, the woman I trusted with everything, was capable of this level of deception. I kept thinking about all the moments I missed, all the signs I ignored. She told me she loved me, that she was committed. Turns out that was just a lie, too. Her story afterward was classic. She started crying, saying she was sorry, claiming she was under a lot of stress, that Jake meant nothing, that she only did it because she felt neglected. She spun a web of lies, trying to make me feel guilty for catching her, but I wasn't buying it. I saw her for what she was, a manipulative, selfish woman who had no problem throwing everything away for some guy and a quick cash grab. The betrayal was so raw I couldn't even look at her without feeling this mix of anger and despair. I knew then that I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. All I knew was that my world had shattered, and I was left standing in the ruins of a marriage I thought was solid. After I found out about her affair with Jake and the money she stole, everything changed in an instant. I felt like I was walking around in a fog, trying to process what I just learned. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the moments I had missed, the signs I ignored, and now the reality of her betrayal. The woman I'd trusted with everything had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. How did I get here? I kept asking myself that over and over. It was like waking up in someone else's nightmare. The first thing I did was confront her again. I needed her to admit it, to confess, to see the truth in her eyes. I told her I knew about Jake, about the money, everything. Her reaction was predictable. She broke down crying, trying to justify herself. She said she was stressed, that I wasn't paying enough attention, that Jake was just a distraction, that she never meant for it to go this far. She claimed she loved me, that she was sorry, that she was depressed. I listened to her, but I wasn't buying any of it. Sorry doesn't justify cheating or stealing. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that she'd been lying to me for so long. What pushed me over the edge was when she started throwing accusations back at me. Said I was neglectful, that I was too busy with work, that I didn't give her enough attention. She told me I was a fool to trust her, that she was always going to do what she wanted regardless of what I said. That was the moment I realized how manipulative she really was. She wasn't just a cheater. She was a liar, a thief, and a master at gaslighting. I felt a mixture of anger and sadness, anger that she could betray me so completely, and sadness that I ever believed in her. I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. I needed to protect myself, my assets, and my dignity. I started gathering evidence, screenshots of her messages, bank statements, emails. I also reached out to a lawyer because I knew the financial damage was worse than I'd initially thought. The $250, $0 she transferred into her sister's account was just the tip of the iceberg. I had no idea how much more she might have taken or hidden. I also discovered she'd been secretly trying to sell the house, which was worth over $1 million. All this time, she was planning her escape, maybe even thinking about leaving me entirely. The betrayal ran deep, but what hurt the most was how calm she was about it. She kept lying, spinning stories, pretending to be the victim. Every time I pressed her, she'd throw more accusations back, call me paranoid or insecure. She told me I was overreacting, that I should just let it go, that she'd change. But I knew better. I could see her true colors now, and it wasn't pretty. It was like watching a snake shed its skin, revealing a cold, calculating person underneath. I started to realize how much I'd been blind, how I'd invested years into this woman only to get stabbed in the back. That's when I made up my mind. I couldn't stay with her, not after everything I'd uncovered. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I wanted to fight for what was rightfully mine, especially the house, the savings, and my dignity. The fact that she was fighting me in court over the house was just another slap in the face. She claimed she deserved half because she contributed to the marriage, but I knew the truth. She'd been cheating, stealing, and lying. All those years of trust were gone. I was done playing nice. I wanted her out of my life for good, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to get justice. In the days that followed, I started to plan my next steps carefully. I hired a lawyer, gathered all the evidence, and prepared for a fight. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. She was manipulative and cunning, and she had the support of her family behind her. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, not just financially but emotionally too. I had to reclaim my life, my peace of mind, and the respect I once had for myself. I never thought I'd be in this position, but here I was, ready to take her to court and expose her for what she really was, a liar, a cheat, and a thief. The days after I decided to fight back felt like walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every moment was filled with a mix of anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone, sleeping with Jake, secretly transferring half our savings into her sister's account, and now fighting me over the house worth over $1 million. It was like she was daring me to stop her, and honestly, I wasn't going to let that happen. I had to protect what was mine, what I'd worked so hard for all these years. I contacted my lawyer the very next morning. I needed someone who knew the ins and outs of family law, someone who could help me get through the mess she'd created. I sat down with him and laid everything out: her affair, the stolen money, her attempts to sell the house. I showed him the bank statements, the emails, the text messages. I wanted him to see her true nature. The lawyer was surprised at how calculated she'd been, how she'd planned everything in secret. But he also told me that I had a solid case, especially since I had all the evidence. Meanwhile, I started digging into her phone and computer myself. I wanted to understand her mindset, her motives. It wasn't just about the money or the affair. It was about how she'd completely betrayed me. I found more evidence: messages with Jake, plans to leave town, even some fake documents she'd been trying to create to justify her actions. It was clear she was planning to take everything and run. I felt sick thinking about how she'd been lying to my face for months, pretending to be the perfect wife. The woman I thought I knew was a master manipulator, and I was finally seeing her for what she really was. I also discovered she'd been talking to her sister, Lisa, about everything. Lisa knew about the affair and the stolen money, and she was helping her hide it. I couldn't believe how deep this went. It was like a web of lies and betrayal that I'd been completely blind to. I felt a mix of rage and helplessness. I'd trusted her with my life, my future, and she'd been plotting behind my back the entire time. The worst part was knowing she'd been lying to me even as she fought me in court, claiming she deserved half of everything. She, stolen from us, cheated on me, and now she was trying to take my house, my home, away from me. I started to realize I had to get ahead of her. If she was planning to sell the house or hide assets, I needed to act fast. I filed for an emergency injunction to freeze the house and her accounts. I knew she'd fight me hard, but I was prepared. I also reached out to a private investigator to follow her and Lisa. I wanted to see if she was planning to leave town or do anything else to cover her tracks. The more I learned, the more I saw how dangerous she could be. She lied for so long, I didn't even recognize her anymore. In the meantime, I started talking to friends and family. I didn't want to go through this alone. Some of them told me I was a fool for ever trusting her, but most just listened and offered support. It was a strange feeling, being betrayed by someone you loved and trusted, but also knowing I had to be strong. I couldn't let her ruin everything I'd built. I kept telling myself that I'd get through this, that I'd come out on the other side with some semblance of justice. I also began to question myself. Was I naive? Did I miss the signs? But deep down, I knew I had done my best. She was the one who chose to betray me, not the other way around. Then, one evening, I found out something that made my blood run cold. Her sister Lisa had been secretly transferring money from her account to some offshore accounts. I didn't have all the details yet, but I knew it was bad. I realized that this was bigger than just one affair or one stolen sum. It was a full-blown scheme, and I was caught right in the middle of it. I felt like I was in a war I couldn't win, but I also knew I had to keep fighting. I couldn't let her get away with this, not after everything. I had to protect my assets, my reputation, and most of all myself. I spent the night poring over everything I'd uncovered, trying to connect the dots. It was overwhelming, but I knew I had to stay focused. I couldn't let her manipulate her way out of this. The more I learned, the more I realized how deeply she'd lied. I'd been a fool to ever trust her, but now I was determined to make her pay for the damage she'd done. I didn't care what she said in court or what her sob stories were. The truth was out, and I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine. I just hoped I had the strength to see this through. The courtroom battles that followed felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every day I had to sit there, listening to her lawyer spin her lies, defending her theft and betrayal as if she was the victim. She stood there, bitchy and manipulative, trying to paint herself as the wronged wife, claiming I was abusive, neglectful, and unfaithful myself. It was infuriating. She looked at me with this smug, condescending expression like she thought she could outsmart everyone. But I knew better. When the court asked about the transfer of the $250, she tried to deny it at first, then spun some story about it being a loan to her sister, Lisa. I had the bank statements, the emails, the proof. I brought everything. My lawyer hammered her on it, showing how she'd been planning this for months. She'd hidden the money in her sister's account, then tried to cover her tracks by claiming it was a loan. But it was clear she was just trying to steal from me, plain and simple. The judge looked at her skeptically, and I could see the wheels turning. The fight over the house was even more intense. She claimed she deserved half because she'd contributed to the marriage, even though I had the documents proving I was the sole owner. She argued that she'd helped build our life, that her sacrifices mattered. But I knew the truth. She'd been having an affair with Jake, secretly transferring money, plotting to leave me. I had evidence that she'd been trying to sell the house behind my back, even drafting fake documents to make it look like I agreed. I felt the rage boiling inside me. How could she be so manipulative, so cold? The court sessions were exhausting. She played the victim, crying and whining, claiming I was trying to ruin her. Meanwhile, I sat there furious, knowing I was fighting for my rights and my sanity. The judge finally seemed to see through her act when I presented the proof of her betrayal and theft. It was a relief, but it also made me realize how much damage she'd done. I had to stay strong, keep my composure, and keep fighting for what was rightfully mine. I couldn't let her get away with destroying everything I'd worked for. Throughout all this, I kept feeling the emotional. One moment I was furious, seeing her smug face in court, knowing she'd betrayed me so completely. The next, I felt deep sadness, mourning the marriage I thought I had, mourning the loss of the woman I believed loved me. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I was so blind to her lies. It was a terrible, humbling realization. I trusted her with everything, and she'd used that trust to hurt me in the worst way possible. I also started to question my own judgment. Was I naive, too trusting, or was she just a master manipulator from the start? I wondered if I could have done something differently, if I could have caught her sooner. But at the end of the day, what mattered was that I was finally seeing her for who she truly was, and I was determined not to let her win. I had to protect what was left of my dignity, my assets, and my future. That meant fighting hard, staying disciplined, and not letting her get the last word. The most shocking moment came when I uncovered her plans to leave the country with Lisa, taking the remaining money and disappearing forever. I found emails where she discussed how to escape if things didn't go her way in court. I knew I had to act fast. I filed an emergency motion to prevent her from leaving the state, and I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her movements. It was terrifying knowing she was willing to run away, to abandon everything she'd stolen and lied about. I felt betrayed all over again, but I also felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had to stop her before she vanished into the night with whatever was left of our lives. In the midst of all this chaos, I realized how much I'd lost: trust, stability, the woman I thought I loved. But I also realized I had gained clarity. I saw her true face, and I knew I could never go back to that life. I started planning my next moves, focusing on rebuilding what I could and making sure she paid for what she'd done. I was tired, emotionally drained, but I refused to give up. I had to see this through. For myself, for the life I wanted to rebuild. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined. I couldn't let her destroy everything I'd worked for. The final stretch of this nightmare has been the most intense. After all the court battles, investigations, and frantic efforts to stop her from fleeing, I finally felt like I was gaining some ground. The judge granted the emergency injunction to freeze the house and her assets. That was a huge victory, but it didn't mean the war was over. She was still fighting tooth and nail, trying to twist everything in her favor. Her lawyer kept pushing the narrative that I was the villain, that she was the victim of a controlling husband, that she deserved everything because she contributed to the marriage in her own way. Meanwhile, I had to keep my guard up constantly. I hired the private investigator, and he kept tabs on her movements. Sure enough, she was trying to plan her escape. I found out she'd been meeting with shady contacts, trying to arrange a quick sale of the house, and even making plans to leave the country with Lisa and whatever money she could get her hands on. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. Every day I was waiting for the next bombshell, another lie, another attempt to steal what was left. I also learned that Lisa, her sister, was fully in on it. She'd been transferring money into offshore accounts, trying to hide her sister's trail. I had the evidence in emails and bank statements. I felt a mix of disgust and betrayal. These two women had been working together behind my back from the start. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind, how I missed all the signs. But now, all that mattered was stopping her from walking away with my house, my money, and my future. The emotional toll was crushing. I'd gone from feeling betrayed and angry to feeling numb. I'd lost my wife, my trust, and almost everything I thought was secure. I started to question whether I'd ever be able to recover from this. But then I remembered my kids. If I had any hope of building a new life, I had to stay strong for them. I couldn't let her win. I had to fight for my rights, for my dignity, and for the future I still believed I could have. One night I sat in my living room, staring at the documents and evidence spread out before me. It hit me how much she'd lied, how deeply she'd betrayed me. And yet I also realized something else. I wasn't going to let her destroy what I'd built. I was going to see this through, no matter how hard it got. I knew she was planning to leave that week, maybe even that night, but I had already arranged everything to stop her. I filed for a court order to prevent her from leaving the state, and I had the police ready if she tried to take the kids or the house. The final blow came when I received word that she was trying to get a passport renewed to leave the country. I immediately alerted the authorities and they stopped her at the border. She was furious, screaming and crying, but there was nothing she could do. I could finally breathe a little easier, knowing I'd managed to contain her for now. But I knew this wasn't over. She'd fight me again in court, try to get around the restrictions, and I had to stay alert. What struck me most during this whole ordeal was how much I'd underestimated her. She's a manipulative, ruthless woman who'd do anything to get what she wanted, money, freedom, or whatever else she thought she could steal. I felt a strange mix of relief and bitterness. Relief that I'd stopped her from running away with everything, and bitterness that I'd ever trusted her in the first place. I kept telling myself I'd be okay, that I'd rebuild, but inside I was still shaken. How do you come back from a betrayal of this magnitude? How do you even begin to trust again? The hardest part was knowing she'd probably never face real consequences for her actions. She'd walk away from this, maybe with a few court penalties, but she'd still have her freedom, her lies, and her stolen money. Meanwhile, I was left picking up the pieces of a shattered life. But I promised myself I wouldn't let her ruin me completely. I'd fight for my house, my savings, and my dignity. I'd make sure she paid for what she did, not just financially but emotionally too. I might be broken, but I wasn't beaten yet. And I knew that somehow I'd find a way to move on from this, even if it took years. I look back now and wonder how I ever thought I knew her, how I ever believed she was the woman I married. But I also know one thing for sure. I will never trust her again, and I will do everything in my power to rebuild my life, free from her lies and manipulations. This experience has been brutal, but it's also been a lesson, one I won't forget. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize how much this entire ordeal has changed me. I went from being a man who trusted his wife implicitly to someone who now questions everything about human nature. The betrayal cut so deep I thought I'd never recover. Her cheating, the theft, the lies, all of it felt like a punch to the gut that left me reeling. But through all the chaos, I also learned something crucial. I am stronger than I thought. I had to be. There was no other choice but to fight tooth and nail to protect what little I had left. Getting her out of the house, stopping her from fleeing the country and uncovering her web of lies took every ounce of strength I had. It was a brutal fight, legal battles, investigations, constant paranoia, but I refused to let her win. I knew I'd be forever, but I also knew I couldn't let her take everything, my home, my money, my dignity. That realization pushed me to keep going, even when I felt like giving up. Looking back, I see how blind I was. I ignored the signs, convinced she was just stressed or overwhelmed. I gave her the benefit of the doubt because I loved her. But love doesn't mean blind trust, especially when the person you're trusting is secretly plotting behind your back. I see now that I should have been more cautious, more aware. But I also understand that no one is perfect, and sometimes, even the most vigilant can be caught off guard. What matters is that I've learned from it. Most importantly, I've come to accept that I can't change what happened. I can only control how I respond to it moving forward. I've started focusing on rebuilding my life, finding new work, reconnecting with friends and family, and trying to heal from the emotional wounds. It's not easy. Some days are better than others, but I'm determined to move past this betrayal and create a future that's mine again. One of the biggest lessons I take away from this is that trust must be earned, not just given blindly. People show their true colors eventually. If I'd been more cautious, maybe I could have caught her sooner. But I also realize that sometimes you only see what you want to see, and that's okay. You learn, you grow, and you become more resilient. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the small signs. Protect your assets and your peace of mind. And never let anyone, no matter how much you love them, take you for granted or betray your trust. Because once that trust is broken, it's damn hard to repair. But I promise you can survive it. You can come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more aware of what really matters in life. I'm still healing. I probably will be for a long time. But I'm also moving forward. I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love you can give yourself is to walk away from someone who doesn't value you, and that's exactly what I did. I refuse to be a victim of her lies anymore. I'm reclaiming my life piece by piece, and I will be okay. Because at the end of the day, I know my worth, and I know that no betrayal, no matter how deep, can define me.